Welcome back, my wonderful seventh graders. This is week 9. We're in lesson 2 and in the book. If you'd like to read along with us, we're on page 320. Ready? Here we go. As per usual, a little quiz. About 90% of the water on Earth is saltwater. Humans can use this saltwater for drinking and cooking. True or false? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, before I answer the question, I just want to show you this picture again. If you don't recognize these little red-shaped inflatable donuts, as I like to call them, these are your red blood cells. And the first picture is our normal red blood cells. So that's how they should look like. They should look like kind of like a donut that's pumped full of air, nice and squishy. And on the right, we see that they look like I kind of like let all the air out of that, like a pool toy. It's all wrinkly and shriveled. Well, that's what our red blood cells look like if we drink salt water. So do you think the red blood cells can do their job when they aren't in their normal shape? Like, could you drive a car if it was all squished up after like getting in an accident? No. So our red blood cells aren't going to work very well if they're all shriveled, and the reason that they're shriveled like a raisin left out in the sun is because these cells were in salt water. So what do you think? Can we drink salt water? No. Okay, so this is false. Humans need fresh water for drinking and cooking. Okay, so yesterday we talked about the two types of water on Earth, saltwater and freshwater, and just to remind you with this little diagram, we're going to see that most of our water on Earth is salt water, about 97%. And if you look in that white circle I just put up on the board, this represents fresh water, and most of our fresh water is locked away in ice, and we can only use about 1% of the fresh water on Earth for what we need it for cooking, for drinking, for cleaning ourselves. So where are we going to find this fresh water that we can use? Well, that's the goal of our lesson today. We're going to talk about surface water, which is water that we can use. And a definition of surface water is water that is found on earth, land, surface. So we're not talking about the ocean, we're talking about land, and on top of that land, water that we can use. All right, so where are we going to find surface water? We are going to find surface water that is fresh water in lakes, rivers, streams, and marshes. All right, so a lake is not as big as an ocean. It's also freshwater, so that's a major difference between lake and ocean. A river is not as wide as a lake. A stream is not as big as a river, and a wetland marsh is basically like land that has a lot of shallow or not so deep water, but it's totally covered in water. We're also going to be able to find some surface water in moisture on top of soil, which is like a fancy science word for dirt. And in colder places, the water that is in the dirt is actually going to become frozen, and this is called permafrost. So it's like if you dig under the dirt, you're going to find like a layer of frozen dirt and ice. All right, let's talk about lakes first, because lakes are where we're going to find the most fresh water on Earth. There's lots of ways that we can make lakes, lots of ways that lakes can be formed. One way is moving plates, and I don't mean like go in the kitchen and shuffle some plates around. I mean tectonic plates, which is basically our Earth is made up of these tectonic plates that kind of float on top of the mantle or the layer that's right underneath Earth's crust. And when plates move and shift, we can have earthquakes, but back in the early days of Earth, this was also another way that lakes could form. Another way you can make a lake is from a river eroding. So remember, a river is not as wide or as deep as a lake, but eroding means that rocks is worn away. So like if you have like a favorite toy that you had since a baby and you can kind of see that it starts to like break down after a while, like a teddy bear or a blanket. That's kind of what like erosion is. It's like you use it so much it starts to break down. So when the river erodes, it can become wider and deeper, and that's one way to make a lake. Also, I would say the most famous way to make a lake is when you have a glacier, and that's a ginormous, huge, heavy sheet of ice that moves down and literally scrapes the earth. And the weight of the glacier will make a big hole that will eventually fill up with rainwater. So let me show how we make a glacier lake or a glacial lake. So way back in the day, I had a big old slab of ice that's called a glacier, really big, really heavy. And it starts to move, either because it's melting or gravity is pulling it down. Okay, and as it starts to move, it again scrapes out the earth because it's so big and heavy, and over time, that big old hole that glacier made is going to fill up with water, and then we have a lake. All right, now let's talk about streams and rivers. So all rivers start off as streams, so we could call a baby river a stream. And a stream is a flow of water that's pulled downward by gravity. Okay, so it's just a little trickle. It's not very big. All right, so where does this water come from that forms this trickle? Well, it's going to come from rain, or it's going to come from melting snow or ice. Sorry, Mr. Ice Cube. And streams are lazy, and they will find the easiest path to go down. Remember, they're getting pulled down by gravity. And when I say easiest path, I mean the path that has the less amount of stuff, rocks, trees, that will block that flow of water. And eventually the streams will come together, and this will form rivers. Okay? So all rivers start off as streams. One of the reasons I like to learn about earth and landforms and water is because it really influences our history as human beings. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about history and surface water. So as humans, we can only live about 3 days without water, and we can only drink fresh water like we learned about earlier in this lesson. So humans have tended to set up communities around lakes and rivers because it's easy access to fresh water. So let's look at some famous ancient civilizations that have established themselves near rivers and really changed the course of history. So first of all, we have ancient Egypt, ancient Egyptians near the Nile River. Not only was that provided fresh water, but it also made really good farming around the banks of the Nile River. We also have our first civilization, the city of Mesopotamia, and that was set up on the Tigris and Euphrates River. Okay, so this is not really important, but when I was in high school, we had a history teacher who taught us about ancient civilizations, and he always pronounced Mesopotamia like this, Mesopotamia, and so we would just make fun of this guy so much, and every time we talked, or every time we, the word Mesopotamia came up, we would always do this really dramatic Mesopotamia, but so that's what I used to do in high school, and now you guys are probably making fun of the way that I pronounce things, so Hakuna Matata, circle of life. Okay, back to the lesson. All right, so let's forget about ancient civilizations for a minute. Let's think about our major cities in the U.S. We're lucky enough to live near 2 Great Lakes. And there's lots of big important cities that have set up near lakes for the same reason that the ancient Egyptians set up their community, access to fresh water. So some of our famous cities of the Great Lakes, we got Buffalo, Chicago, Toronto, Cleveland, Detroit, Green Bay. So these are some of the really important cities in the U.S. Okay, let's finish up for today. What is not a source of fresh surface water on Earth? Is it A, marshes, B, rivers, C, oceans, or D, lakes? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to eliminate lakes because lakes are the biggest source of fresh water on Earth. So that's definitely not the answer. Remember, I'm looking for what is not a source. I'm also going to get rid of rivers because, as I just talked about in the last slide, a lot of communities set up near rivers because it's a good source of fresh water. So what's the final answer? Hopefully you said C, oceans. Key for this question, keyword is fresh surface water, and oceans are saltwater. Remember, marshes are technically fresh water, and it's just like an area of land that has been flooded, like permanently flooded with water, maybe about 1 to 2 feet. Okay, guys, that is it for today, and I will see you back here Thursday because it's Workin' Wednesday tomorrow, and you have an assignment on Schoology. All right, have a good day.